Hello aviators, how are you today? My name is Magnar Nordahl. I'm an ATR captain and instructor. This video is the second in a series about how to operate the ATR 600 in accordance with the procedures given in the Flight Crew Training Manual. The first video explained how to power up the aircraft from cold and dark and perform the full cockpit preparation and the short transit checks. This video shows how to prepare the aircraft for flight, including setting up the FMS, start the engines and taxi. Since I made the first video, the ATR model has been upgraded. One bug that has been rectified is the propeller brake ready light. From now on, it is only illuminated when there is blue hydraulic pressure and the other conditions for operating the propeller brake have been met. So to engage the propeller brake, we press the aux pump push button on the pedestal. And when we have the ready light, we can engage the propeller brake. We will now prepare the aircraft for the flight. Both pilots will adjust the seats and rudder pedals. The eyes shall be aligned with the side gauge. The red ball shall obscure the white ball. This ensures the correct view of instruments as well as the runway environment, especially during low visibility approach. We connect and check the headsets. The captain will press the recall push button on the airfield control panel to ensure that all alerts are displayed on the engine warning display. In the sim, we use the click spot. All amber caution lights will disappear one by one when we start the engines. When it comes to Microsoft Flight Simulator, I am still a beginner. Here is a nice feature I learned from pilot Alex 5677. The displays can be transferred to pop-up windows. You hold the cursor over a display, press and hold the right Alt key, and the cursor changes to a magnifying glass. Then you press the left mouse key. The click spots are still active in the pop-up windows. The first officer will set the radio frequencies and tune in the 80s. Both pilots set the QNH, the reference pressure for the altimeters. This is done with the gyro set knob on the index control panel, ICP. As a default in the simulator, all altimeters are set from the captain's position. To calculate the regulatory takeoff weight and takeoff speeds, we use an application called SBS, Single Point Performance Software. It is not available in the flight simulator. The FMS will calculate the takeoff speeds when there are no limitations, but when we are departing from short runways or in hot and high conditions, we will have to guess the limitations and speeds. The departure will be flown on the FMS, and we set the nav aids to auto-tuning. This ensures the best DME reception, which is used to back up the GPS. Likewise, we make sure the bearing pointers are off, as we don't want to confuse the DME distance with the distance to the next waypoint. The captain will do the following checks. Fuel quantity, here we have 2500 kilos. Fuel tanks balanced. Reset fuel used, it is automatically done at power up, otherwise the captain opens the performance page and select reset. The captain scans the memo panel. There shall be no indications except for no device and seat belt. Finally, the captain checks the propeller brake is on or off if the procedure is not to use the hotel mode. We are now ready to set up the FMS, which is controlled from the MCDU. We will fly from Toulouse to Bordeaux in France. Since we are flying from the left-hand seat, we select FMS number 1. We check that the config data and nav data are OK. Select Init. Previously, the initial procedure was to check position init, nav data and units pages, but this is not a procedure anymore. To set up the FMS, we must enter the weight, performance init and flight plan init pages, in that order. Select weight. The FMS requires you to enter the zero fuel weight and fuel weight before you can set up the flight plan. So we set up a zero fuel weight based on estimated payload, for example 19,000 kilos. The fuel is 2,500 kilos, and this gives the gross weight, which defines the speeds for takeoff and landing. The alternate airport is back to Toulouse, and we will need 800 kilos to get there and land with the final reserve on board. Select return, and we are back on the init page. Select performance init. We will cruise at level 140 or 14,000 feet pressure altitude. Alternate is Toulouse LFBO at flight level 150 or 15,000 feet. Select return. Select flight plan init. Select route. As flight number can we use ATR 123. We depart Toulouse, LFBO. Destination is Bordeaux, LFBD. Select execute. Left click on the departure airport. We will depart from runway 32 right. The SID, standard instrument departure, is Honeycomb 6 Bravo. No transition waypoint. Execute. I press this key to see the speed and altitude restrictions for the departures. We click on the left side of Honeycomb and enter the lateral revision page. Select the airway. Select Golf 39. Select Sesha. Select Via. Select Romeo 17. Select Mirba. Execute. And return. When we don't know the runway in use and approach procedure at the destination, we leave the flight plan as it is and insert the arrival route and approach procedure when we receive the ATs. But in this case, we are 99% sure about the procedure, so we can enter approach procedure right away. We click on the left side arrival airport. Select ILS 23. Select Mirba Vanna Lima. From the VIA list, select Libro 2. Return. There is a discontinuity in the flight plan. To remove it, we select the clear key and click on the left side of the line. Execute. The flight plan is now completed. The blue waypoints are the missed approach. Press the progress key. Here we check the total distance and estimated fuel on board on arrival. It looks good. Press the performance key. This is the takeoff performance page. We will come back to it after you have set the correct weight from the load sheet. We press the performance key one more time. This is the cruise performance page, and here we can enter the wind along the route if required. Today the winds are very light, so I leave it open. Press the performance key again. This is the approach performance page. Here we insert the wind for departure. This is very useful if you have to return back to departure airport for any reason. We press the VNAV key twice to open a VNAV page 2. Here we can insert QNH and temperature, but this function is not activated yet. Finally, we check there are no amber messages on the MCDU. We also check the navigation display for the same. Normally, the initial climb clearance at Toulouse is flight level 70, so we set altitude select to 7,000 feet. And for information, the transition altitude is 5,000 feet. The navigation display has three modes: arc, full rows, as shown here, and planning mode. The click spots for changing the format are to the left and right of the screen. To change the range, click above and below the navigation display. This is the planning mode. We use it when we brief the departure and later when we brief the arrival. In this case, the departure is LACO 6 Bravo, track 320 degrees, 7.4 nautical miles to Bravo Oscar 320. Then we track 345 degrees, 3.2 nautical miles to Bravo Oscar 322. Cross at or above 5,000 feet. Track 334 degrees, 35 nautical miles to LACO. Join Gulf 39 to Sèche. Then to Mirba. Cross at or below 17,000 feet. We will brief the arrival when we are preparing for approach. The final cockpit preparation procedure is now completed, and the captain will ask for the final cockpit preparation checklist. Normal checklists can be read in two different ways. We can use the electronic checklist in the procedure window in the engine warning display, or we can use the checklists from the top menu in Flight Simulator. I will show both. When the aircraft is on the ground, it is the first officer who reads the checklist. The first officer reads the lines one by one, and the captain checks the status of the item and gives a response. This method is called challenge and response. When possible, the response shall be an actual value. So now we can start with the final cockpit preparation checklist. The first officer reads parking brake, and then the captain responds engage, pressure checked. Altimeters 1013, 500 feet. Landing elevation, this item doesn't work in the simulator for the moment, but here the landing elevation will be 100 feet. FMS comma now, they are set. Fuel quantity, fuel on board. Now we cross-check the fuel on the fuel tanks with the fuel we inserted in the FMS. 2500, check. Fuel used, reset. Memo panel. We have no device, seatbelt, and we also check we have the propeller brake. Power management, takeoff. Final cockpit preparation checklist complete. In the aircraft, we use the electronic checklist. To move the cursor and validate the selections, we use the following click spots: down, up, validate. First, we check the version of the checklist. And then we go parking brake, engage, pressure checked. Altimeters 1013, 500. Landing elevation should be 100. FMS comma now, set. Fuel quantity, fuel on board 2005, 2005. fuel used, reset, memo panel, no device, seatbelt, prop on. Power management, takeoff. Final cockpit preparation checklist complete. When the service door is closed, we can start engine number 2 in hotel mode. With the propeller brake on, the engine acts like an APU, providing electric power and air conditioning. The captain calls the marshaller, who confirms the service door is closed and that the area around the engine is clear. The engines are started by the first officer. Service door closed, fuel pump 2 on, wing lights on, propeller brake on, right side clear. For the first start of the day, we use start A and B. For the following starts, we use start A for odd days and start B for even days. The MFD shall show engine secondary page. Put one hand on condition lever number 2. Starter on. At 10% NH, move the condition lever to feather. Fuel open. Ignition, oil pressure, 45%, starter off. ITT, 740 degrees. It's a bit hot, but don't worry about the red label. The limit is much higher. Parameters stabilized, off and start abort. The captain checks the voltage of DC gen number 2 and external power off. We check DC Gen 2 fault light off, DC BTC closed, bleed 2 fault light off, crossvalve open light, pack 1 and 2 fault lights off, and captain tells the marshaller to disconnect the GPU. We do that from the electronic flight bag. When we have received the load sheet, we open a weight page on the MCDU. Click on Performance key, select Performance Init and weight. The zero fuel weight is in this case 19,627 kilos. That gives a gross weight of 22,127 kilos. The center of gravity is in this case 26.9% MAC. It is already set. This gives a pitch trim of 1.1. On the performance takeoff page, we can read the takeoff speeds for a non-limiting runway. If the runway is limiting, for example it's short, the obstacles or hot and high conditions, we need the SBS to calculate the takeoff speeds and insert them manually. We set the pitch trim 1.1 up. On the MFD, we open a performance page. If there are atmospheric icing conditions below 1500 feet, we click here, and then the FMS calculates the takeoff speeds for icing conditions. When all is set and checked, we confirm the takeoff data. When the takeoff data are confirmed, a magenta bug appears on the pitch trim indicator. When all passengers and bags are on board, and the cabin crew have reported to the flight crew, the doors can be closed. Don't forget the tail prop. The first officer calls ground control and receives clearance for engine start. The captain switches on the beacon light and calls for the before propeller rotation checklist. CDLS, cockpit door locking system, on. FMS on takeoff data, confirmed. Trims 1.1 up and set. Tail prop on board. Doors closed. Seatbelt signs on. Beacon on. Before propeller rotation checklist complete. The captain calls the marshaller, who confirms the shocks are on, and the area around the aircraft is clear. The first officer looks out and confirms the area is clear. The captain activates the aux pump, and when the green ready light illuminates, the propeller brake is selected off. The first officer looks out and calls rotation when the propeller is turning. When the NP propeller speed is around 14%, the first officer calls NP stabilized. The captain calls for condition lever number 2 to auto. The first officer moves the condition lever to auto, single channel, low pitch, when the NP is stabilized around 71%, the first officer checks the following: AC wide generator 2 fault light out, AC wide BTC closed, hydraulic pressure, TRU on, probe seating on, and if we depart in icing condition, we select anti-ice on, anti-skid test, and flap 15. Ready to start engine number 1. The captain calls the marshaller, who confirms the area around the aircraft is clear. Clear left. Fuel pump on. Start A and B. Starter on. %, fuel open, ignition, oil pressure, 45%, starter off, ITT 739 degrees, parameter stabilized, starter off and start abort. We check DC Gen 1 fault light extinguished and DC BTC open. The green bar should have been extinguished. This is a bug that should be rectified soon. We check bleed 1 fault light extinguished and ground crossfeed off. Captain calls for condition lever 1 to auto and the first officer complies. Single channel, low pitch. The first officer calls NP stabilized and checks AC wide Gen 1 fault light extinguished and AC BTC should be open, and again the green bar should have been extinguished. On the overhead panel there shall be no amber lights, but the exhaust mode fault light should be illuminated for 2 minutes after engine start. Another small bug. We check the system pages. There shall be no fault messages. The captain closes the communication hatch and checks the nose steering is on. Press recall, there shall be no alerts. When ATC clearance is received, we set the transponder code. And the FMS is checked and eventually revised to match the clearance. The first officer set up the flight guidance control panel. We check the coupling side is on flying pilot side. We check the nose sources are set to FMS on both sides. We check the alt select is set. We set heading to runway heading. Select heading mode, nav mode, IAS mode, VNAV mode. And we set target speed to auto. The captain reads the FMA. Heading select low IS green, FD couple left, LNAV VNAV IS blue, speeds 112 blue, 120 magenta, 7000 feet. Before taxi procedure complete. Before taxi checklist. FWS flight warning system recalled. Cockpit communication hatch closed. Condition level 1 and 2 auto. Anti-icing, it's either on or off. TRU on. Anti-skid test performed. Flaps 15. Nose steering on. Before taxi checklist complete. We tell the marshaller to remove the wheel shocks, and after receiving clearance from ground control, we are ready to taxi. When we look around, it appears that the equipment in front of the aircraft will not move away. And I don't know if there is a command that can be used to remove them. Anyway, my plan is to taxi out the taxiway behind the aircraft so I can use reverse and turn left. Taxi and takeoff light on. The captain announces the block of time and the first officer starts the elapsed timer. This timer is accessed with the data key, timers menu. To start reverse taxi, hold the brakes, release the parking brake, apply some reverse power and release the brakes. Do not brake when you're moving backwards, because the aircraft might tip on its tail. Instead, apply forward thrust to stop the aircraft. When we taxi forward, it's time for brake check. The cabin crew is doing the safety briefing for the passengers, so we must be gentle. First, the captain tests the brakes, then the first officer, and finally, the captain checks the emergency brake. Then the first officer activates the takeoff configuration test. This is to ensure that the aircraft is correctly configured for takeoff. If you, for example, have forgotten to set the flaps, an alarm is sound when you press the button. We enter taxiway Papa from Tango 60. And then I made a strange discovery. When I activated the pop-up window for the checklist, I lost control of the aircraft. So to do the taxi checklist, I had to stop the aircraft first. Hopefully, this snag can be rectified. Taxi checklist. Taxi and takeoff lights on. Brakes check. FGCP and FMA set and check. Takeoff config test performed. Taxi checklist completed. And that is all for this time. In the next video we will take off and look at some of the flight director modes before we make an approach and land. Until then, thank you for watching, have a wonderful day and happy landing!